Hey folks, it's Elton here, Grumpy Git. No, I haven't given up van life. I'm currently pet sitting and thought that I would sit in the house and create a video rather than again in my van. It's a bit naff weather outdoors. So I'm confined to the house today and I thought I would just go and create a video about the 5 top challenges I have experienced with winter. So this is my second winter of living in my van full time while I undertake my photography project. And it does seem like every winter there's a trend on YouTube where everybody gives you tips about how to keep warm and such in winter. So let's start with that, shall we? Of course it's cold in the winter. It's a given, really, science. However, the UK doesn't get as cold as some other countries, obviously. So whilst we do occasionally get -degree temperatures, generally we stay above that. We did have a week in January where I think the one night we got down to about -4 and then -6 and then I think -8. But really, keeping warm is not rocket science, is it? Presumably you've lived in a house before. You know the fundamentals of keeping warm: heat, clothing. So in a van, you typically have a few options with regards to heating the van. So in my Hymer, I have an inbuilt Truma boiler system. So it's a combi boiler. It does the hot water, plus it circulates warm air around the van to heat the van. Now the benefit of that is obviously it's got ducting around the van, so it heats from the ground level up, which is quite important in a van because that's generally where the cold comes from, is under the van. And obviously the other big one is diesel heaters, which a lot of self-build people will install into their van. Now the problem with diesel heaters especially is that they can be noisy. So if, like me, and again all my videos are obviously very specific to my circumstances, which are I'm a solo van lifer, I primarily stick to campsites, and as some of you will know, this year I've started doing pet sitting. So when I'm not at someone's property, I'm on a campsite. I don't wild park currently because I tow a bike, because I have an elderly dog, etc., etc. So for me, having a diesel heater is not going to work. As I say, a lot of campsites prohibit the use of diesel heaters because they do make a noise. And whilst during the day they might not make a racket, in the evening when it's very quiet on these campsites, it is a hell of a noise. So something to consider if you're going to do your own build or you're considering what heating system to use, is that if you're going to stay on campsites primarily, you are going to be limited, especially on the bigger sites, where they will just not allow you to use them. Gas boilers don't make as much noise. I mean, they're not silent by any stretch, but they're not as noisy as diesel heaters by far. In addition, typically for me, because I'm on electric hookup most of the time, because in the winter my solar panels just do not generate enough power to charge up the leisure batteries for me to be constantly using my laptop for editing and that kind of thing. My MacBook is very power hungry, so in the winter it's just not feasible for me to not have electric hookup. So when I'm on electric hookup, all I have is a small Amazon Basics fan heater. I can't remember how much it cost me, but I will put a link down in the description even, which may be an affiliate link. I'm going to sign up with Amazon affiliate marketing and try and earn a few pennies. But yeah, that little fan heater really keeps the van warm, and the benefit of the electric fan heater is also that it removes moisture from the air, so I don't suffer with condensation in my van. Both gas and diesel heaters will produce moisture in the air, and obviously moisture turns into condensation. So something to be aware of also about diesel and gas heaters is that, every morning wipe your windows down, make sure there's no dampness around that can get into the woodwork or into your plywood or whatever you've built your van with. With my Hymer, because it's made for the alpine climate, actually, it's very well insulated, as you can imagine, because the alpine countries, they get far colder than we do here in the UK. So it's really, really well insulated. And with my little fan heater, depending on how cold it is, when we had the minus temperatures recently, it was running maybe 10, maximum 15 minutes an hour, and then kind of maintaining that by running another 5-10 minutes an hour. So it's not constantly on because of the van's insulation. So when you're building your own van, obviously insulation is a big factor in making sure that your van can keep warm in the colder months. In addition to that, obviously, it's all the standard basic things that you would do. Layer up. I have thermal trousers or pants, trousers, thermal shirts that I wear. And then obviously, if you're heading out, just layer up as many layers as you need. Get a thick duvet. Feather duvets are quite warm in the winter months. Just wrap up. It's honestly, like I say, it's kind of common sense. I don't know why so many van lifers tend to think the rest of us are idiots and try and tell us how to keep warm. But yeah, so that's challenge number one. It's just dealing with the cold and keeping your van warm. Another challenge that I find actually more difficult to deal with is the amount of rain that we suffer from in the UK in the winter months. And again, this can depend on which country you are in within the UK. So, for example, if you're in Scotland, pretty much rains all the time. Summer, winter, spring, autumn, it doesn't really matter. It's raining. Wales, similar story. It can rain quite a bit, even in the summer months. England, depending on which county you're in or what region you're in, you get fluctuating amounts of rain. So, East Anglia, where I lived for 20 odd years, it was very mild region. Didn't really get any snow when there was snow around the rest of the country. Most of the storms kind of bypassed it. So it was a very mild region. Whereas at the moment I'm down south in West Sussex. And, well, to be fair, since I got down here for the last 2 weeks, it's not rained a single day that I can recall. But it did rain for about a month prior to that. From just before Christmas until around the 15th of January, it rained every day. And, I mean, belted down. So, yeah, dealing with that, because obviously when it's pissing down with rain outside, for me anyway, I don't like being wet. It's difficult when you're living in a van to dry your stuff out if it gets wet. So I typically am confined to the van when it's raining, and when it's prolonged, like I say, 20 odd days of it, you can get a bit of cabin fever. So for me, the rain is actually worse than the cold, because I personally don't have a problem keeping warm. Find what works for you, but yeah, the wet is what really gets me down during the winter months in the UK. And along with the wet, obviously, is mud, and especially so if you're traveling with a pet. It is an absolute nightmare keeping a van clean in muddy conditions. When I was at Hertford campsite, literally as soon as we stepped out the van, we were in mud. It was impossible to avoid it. And when it's raining outside and it's muddy, you can't really wipe the dog down outdoors because it's just pissing down the rain and everywhere's full of mud. So you wipe his foot, he puts it down, it's full of mud again. So your van gets very dirty very quickly in the winter months, and honestly, it's an ongoing battle to keep your van tidy in the winter months. I actually went and got some of these plastic sheets, like vinyl almost, and stuck that over my carpets. Just easier to kind of wipe that clean rather than dealing with dirty carpets. So maybe something to consider. It's it's almost like an anti-slip, what you would have in a shower, I suppose. But yeah, I just put that down on the ground, and that seems to help with keeping the carpets clean for one, and just being easier to maintain and clean. The other big thing for me, and I've mentioned this in a few other videos, in the winter months, is loneliness can be a big issue because, one, there aren't many people out camping or on campsites. So when I was at Hartford, I mean, a massive site, I don't know for sure, but I'm estimating at least 200 to 300 pitches there. There were a handful of people on the site, campers, and I never saw any of them. Because of the weather, they were typically in their vans all day. And honestly, I think I ran into one or two when I went to the facilities. But other than that, and maybe saw one or two walk past of their dogs when they were heading to the dog walk area. But there was no interaction with people. There was no one to converse with and share stories with and that kind of thing. So yeah, loneliness in the winter time can be a bit tough because, as I said, because it was raining, I couldn't even go into the local town and go and sit in the cafe and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a struggle. As I said, one, you're stuck indoors because of the poor weather, and two, you've got no one to actually talk to. Again, bearing in mind if you're a solo traveler. So yeah, that is a struggle for me. And then finally, the fifth challenge for me is limited campsite availability. So in the UK, due to the wetness, the vast majority of sites are not open over the winter period. That includes the bigger sites and also the certified location or certified sites, the smaller privately owned ones that are typically affiliated with one of the bigger clubs in the UK. Those CL sites especially typically don't have hard standing pitches. They will only have grass pitches. So during the wet months, the winter months, it's just not suitable. Motorhomes will get stuck, etc., etc. So they just close down their campsites for that period. Typically from around the end of October to around 1st of March time, they will be closed. So you are the options are far less in winter as to where you can go find a campsite. But as I say, at the moment, because I'm doing house sitting, it's not that much of a problem for me. I'm kind of fully booked up, maybe a few days gap here and there, but I'm pretty much filled up until the end of September at the moment. So not really something for me to worry about at this stage. But obviously this is not about me. This is just sharing my experience and making you aware of some of the challenges that you might face during the winter. So yeah, those are my top 5 challenges: cold, wet, muddy, loneliness, and restricted site availability. A lot of the people that I've met who are van dwellers or van lifers, whatever you want to call them, head off abroad at this time of the year. And having now spent my second winter in the UK, I fully understand why. And it is my intention, once Shark's time is up, to also go abroad for the winter months. He's just too poorly and too old at this point for me to take him abroad. I just wouldn't feel comfortable. So I'm just going to stick to the UK until such a time that it's feasible for me to go abroad. And I will talk a little bit more about going abroad and the whole Brexit issue of 90 days and stuff in a separate video. But yeah, there it is, guys and girls. I hope that that's provided some value into what the challenges are in the winter. So until next time, be safe, be happy, and be kind. Cheers.